It's breakfast time for the smallmouth bass prowling the fast-running riffles of Michigan's Goose Creek. The slender predator spies a small fish near the riverbed that will surely make a tasty snack. There's the eye, there's the mottled body, and there's the tail swishing against the current. But this little fish is not all that they seem. The smallmouth bass lunges, but before they can take a bite, they get squirted in the face with a choking white cloud. This is an excerpt from one of my favorite chapters of the new book by Dr. Helen Scales. This is the wavy rayed lamp mussel, and the book is Shell Day. I will be talking to you about that very shortly. First, a brief update from Stornoway. We are just back from the Beverley Folk Festival in Yorkshire, which was great fun. Thanks everyone who came along to that. Thanks for having us. And we had a lovely road trip back south. We're taking a break now for July, but we've got festivals aplenty in multiple countries in August, and then we're off on the road in October on the full tour to celebrate the release of Beyonder. Pre-order your copy now and see you there. Now, without further delay, please help me welcome my wonderful guest for today's conservation conversation, Dr. Helen Scales. Hi, Helen. How are you today?
Hello, I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful.
Well, thanks for getting me that copy of the book, which I've really enjoyed reading and rereading over the weeks. And I'm so excited for it to finally be published next month in July.
Oh, me too. It's a beauty, isn't it? I have to say, I love it.
Yeah, well, and this very bright, beautiful artwork, and just the format of it. It's I can actually carry it around everywhere I go, and it's been a pleasure to read it. The other thing is the illustrations. I wonder if we could start there
Yeah,
and ask you to tell the
oh,
listeners
definitely.
about some of the artwork.
Absolutely. I mean, it's why, for me, actually, this is such a special book. Because it's the first one that actually on the front cover has the name of a really good friend of mine, Aaron John Gregory, who I've been collaborating with for years now. He's done lots of front covers of my books and lovely interior illustrations as well, but he's never had his name there. And I feel like that is where it belongs. It absolutely does. So I'm so thrilled that collaboration of ours has finally kind of bore, it's doing what it should be doing, which is putting him right alongside my name. And the other lovely thing is that there is a story to how we got to know each other, Aaron and I, which he tells and I tell a little bit as well in the introduction to the book. And it all concerns one illustration, which is right at the beginning, which is this one, which looks a bit different because he didn't do this actually for the book. He did this years ago, and that's how I found him. I was writing another book about shells. Shells are kind of a thing I love, and I was looking for someone to do some illustrations, and I was just looking around online for pictures of argonauts, which were a species I was writing about, very cool shell-making octopuses. And I found his picture, and then I basically was like, let's get in touch with him. I asked my publisher if we could ask him, if he would be available, and it turns out he was, and that was the beginning of all of this. And so, yeah, he's done these 24 beautiful original artworks for the book. And I just think they're gorgeous. And it really does. I mean, they're little essays. They're short, as you say. You've kind of read the first bit of one of them out. And that's the picture of that one. But he drew an image for each little story, for each species. He did another argonaut, which is this one, which I think is just gorgeous. And all the animals in the book are doing things at particular times of the day. So I had them kind of, having these little scenes that were based on reality, but I kind of imagined things happening all the way through the day and night to these shells.
Even some of the supporting actors in the illustrations. So you've got here the chapter on the spire snail, and one of the characters in their story is obviously the predator there, one of the marshland birds. And Stornoway being a band very familiar with wetlands as a vital habitat. Brian actually is the nature reserve manager for the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust in Llanelli. So it was nice to see some of the animals we're very familiar with. We love the ocean, and we're getting into a real ocean marine biology season here on the podcast. But I found your book was really good at introducing all these species that I'd never really encountered before. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. That was my intention, was a kind of a mix of familiars and strange, weird things as well. So,
yes.
That's exactly
And
my
could you
plan.
tell us a bit about the research that went into the book? Did it involve a
Mm.
lot of traveling, presumably just maybe to the North American parts that are described for some of the animals? And
Yeah, I didn't actually do anything specifically for this book, but I think I draw on quite a lot of experiences I've had before. You know, I was sort of rummaging through my past experiences and travels and thinking, okay, what have I done and seen that would work in this book? So no, I sat in my house here in Cambridge, and also actually, I think I wrote quite a bit of it in Brittany, because I spent quite a bit of time by the sea there, being inspired by the waves and the creatures. So partly was sort of drawing on my own encounters. And then also just a lot of it, I mean, a lot of it is based on scientific research. So I did, each chapter it's grounded in real facts. It's got a bibliography at the end. So if anyone wants to find out more about all the creatures and what they're doing at different times, it's all there. So I didn't make any of it up. It's all very much based on what researchers are finding out about these creatures and their daily lives.
but it's wonderfully told in what almost can feel like a fictional tale, where you really embody them. Well, you anthropomorphize these creatures and say what they're up to at each hour of the day, and that's the concept, isn't it? So, I've always admired nature books that do that sort of thing, break up the seasons or the year into parts and assign a different starring character for each. I wondered if you'd heard of a book called Nature's Calendar, which does something like that. Also has very similar illustrations in there.
Yes, absolutely beautiful. Another beautiful book. It is always so nice, isn't it, to see that mixture of words and stories and images. It's something I guess I didn't really think about when I first started being an author, but it just feels so natural and so exciting to be able to collaborate with
Mm.
visual artists and to produce beautiful
Yeah.
objects. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's something that we've been thinking a lot about recently in the band, because pairing music with artwork is something
Mm.
you just can't get away from. You have to do it in order to release a record, and that's
Right.
often the moment where the record comes to life unexpectedly, because you realize that there is a whole visual flavor and component, and it's all in the artist who
Mm.
we commissioned. So in this particular album that's coming out, it's all photography by our singer Brian, who actually visited St Kilda for a conservation volunteer trip, and so we're using his actual phone footage. But in the past, we've found that illustration brings songs to life in a totally unexpected way.
Mm.
Might be doing something literary of our own sometime soon.
Ooh.
Now, but news on the horizon, I hope. Have you been to St Kilda or any of the remote UK islands of that kind?
Not as remote as that. I would love to. I really would. I remember learning about them at university and the various studies of various animals that live there and things that are going on. But I know the most remote place I guess I've been to is Shetland. I don't know if that really counts, but and that's in a previous. There's some. I did go there specifically for a previous book of mine. To go and see the bird colonies, the gannets, and
Mm.
immerse myself in just absolute abundant life, ocean life. It was incredible, really
Yeah.
cool.
We've really we could play a top trumps island top trumps. So
Let's do
we
it.
know we've won with St Kilda. That's the most remote of the UK islands, as far as I
Yeah,
understand.
wow.
But then there's the Outer Hebrides, which we are named after to some
Of
extent,
course,
and
yes,
then
of
the
course. Yeah, I
have
must
you?
go sometime. It's
Yeah.
absolutely.
There's wonderful history there, and Orkney in this similar part of the world. But then the Farne Islands outside of Lindisfarne and Shields, outside South Shields, those are really special as well. And you mentioned the gannets. Over on
Mm.
the Farne side, it's guillemots. And it's so enjoyable to go out there on a day trip on the boat and
Oh.
see the National Trust sort of buildings where the volunteers live year round, and counting their populations and maintaining habitats. But yeah, it's a
Mm.
match made in heaven. We're both conservationists.
Absolutely. Oh.
And do you want to tell us about the when the book's coming out next month? Is there a way that listeners to this podcast can get involved in a particular way, other than, of course, buying it? Any
Well,
launch events?
I actually have to wait and see when we're hoping to do a launch a bit later in the year, actually, because it is actually part of a series called Earth Day. There are other ones too, which was one reason why I jumped on the chance to do this when they asked me. Although I have to say, actually, when they first said, could you do a book in this series, which is all different kinds of organisms? There is, I think, Flower Day and Tree Day, Mushroom Day, or did they call it Fungi Day? Sorry, I can't quite remember. Another one coming out soon is Insect Day. And when they asked me to do Shell Day, I initially thought, I'm not sure there's going to be enough things happening amongst shell-making creatures to fill a book with one for each hour of the clock. But actually, once I started diving into it, I realized there was lots of really interesting biology and so on going on. Anyway, so it's part of a series. And I think the idea we're hoping is that we'll get a few of the authors of the different books together, maybe at the Natural History Museum in London. So that's
wonderful.
I'll put updates on social media and on my website as when that's happening.
Great. If you need any music to soundtrack that.
Oh my gosh, yes, please. That would be incredible.
There's an artist we interviewed recently for this very series, Colin Riley, who is a brilliant composer and part of the Sonic Collaborations group, and they've soundtracked sunrises at Lowestoft Beach, and they've played in the Earth ship to celebrate marine biology, and this is all a brilliant scene that we're slowly finding ourselves becoming part of. But how to soundtrack nature in the most suitable, natural way. And it leads us on to my first of the conservation conversation questions, where I'd like to ask you about how nature, in terms of a location and a place, can lend itself to your creativity. So perhaps there's a place that you like to go and write or draft your ideas, or a place where you've enjoyed watching some music. But is there a location you can recommend to the audience that has something to do with your creativity?
Ooh, can I pick two?
Of course.
Partly because one of them is actually quite it's quite a hard-hitting story, a hard-hitting kind of feeling I had. And that was a place which I was very, very lucky to go to. I was actually invited to give a lecture series up in Svalbard for new scientists. They were running a sort of science tour for people, and I was invited to go along and talk to the group as we were going around the islands. But I also got to see everything that they were seeing, and I'd never really thought about going that far north and going to the Arctic. And it only really occurred to me almost while I was on my way that I was going to go somewhere so completely different to anywhere I've normally been. Like I've spent a lot of time in the tropics and studying marine ecosystems there, coral reefs and things like that. Now, I've lived and worked in lots of very warm countries, but I'd never really been anywhere that cold. And actually, even just, I think maybe I was sort of even just charging myself to feel a really strong emotional response. But I often, when I was not lecturing, I would put my headphones in and just listen to various different types of music. But even just landing in the country and seeing the snow and seeing the ice and seeing these landscapes that I know are so threatened because of the climate crisis. I've got really overwhelmed, actually. And I think, and one of the bands I was listening to was Sigur Rós. And I remember really specifically this moment when we were in a boat the whole time, and we were driving along that particular moment along the edge of this enormous ice cliff. And it was just, I felt like hours that we were going. It just kept on going and going. So it was enormous, and it was, more frozen water than I think I've ever seen in my life. But again, I just I know how quickly and how threatened those landscapes, those oceanscapes are. And I was sitting on deck watching this cliff go by, listening to Sigur Rós, which just felt to me kind of the right sort of place in the world to be listening to their music. And I was absolutely overwhelmed with I guess, grief. I don't know. I was, bawling my eyes out and having this really strong reaction to the landscape and the music. And since then, and it kind of plays into something that I struggle with as a storyteller, which is this balance of hope and fear, or hope and despair, if you like, about what's happening to our natural world. And I realized that we've got to have both, and that actually feeling so strongly as that kind of drives me on to do things. And that there are times when I need to tell those kind of hard-hitting stories, and times when I should say tell the other just wondrous stories, as I have mostly in things like Shell Day. And I've concentrated on the feelings I have of wanting to show you how amazing these creatures are and the things they do. But there are times when I think we can't shy away from those really big things that are changing. So I have my Sigur Rós moments now, basically, that I remember being in that place specifically. So that was a very personal kind of moment, and I've reflected quite deeply on that since. But then somewhere a bit closer to home, where I do go a lot, is Brittany. I'm very lucky to spend quite a lot of time on the coast, the Atlantic coast of France, and I anywhere there, to be honest. I love. I particularly love getting in the cold water there and seeing the kelp forests and the seagrass meadows and seaweed gardens, and seeing what I can find. And I've had some amazing encounters with octopuses and beautiful creatures that are just there, like right by the shore. I don't have to be scuba diving. I don't have to be doing anything particularly challenging apart from cold. Just a thick wetsuit. That's all I need. And I've spent a lot of time there just floating and seeing what I can see.
Brilliant. Well, along with Lucy Lapwing, who's one of our friends and conservationists, has presented on Springwatch, and myself, we're all really into the cold water swimming. I know it's a really great way of exhilarating oneself quite dramatically.
It
You have
is,
to be
isn't
very
it?
careful not to
Physically
spend too long in the water.
Yes. Do you ever put your face in, or you generally head up?
Yeah, full submersion, ideally.
Nice.
Otherwise, I don't think it counts sometimes. Sucker for punishment, I am, but it can easily be the thing that if you're in the routine of getting the cold water immersion and then don't do it, you're like, hey, why is this day not started right? I should have had more coffee or something.
Oh.
I want to explore more on that Svalbard anecdote. We spoke in almost the very first episode of this podcast to a musician called Sarah Smout, who plays cello and went on a similar expedition on a boat that took a while to get there. And she was tasked or commissioned to play and compose music on the way. And it just, again, sounded like the most brilliant journey. But we spoke to her before, and so it's really nice to hear from someone after the fact what it was really like. And thank you for adding that ice cliff to our list of epic wild spaces. I think it's the most epic, and that balance of grief and awe is something that's hard to put into words.
Absolutely.
I think it also reminds me of an artist, Alice Boyd, who, if you haven't heard her yet, I would strongly recommend checking out. Alice supported us at a festival recently, and just before going on stage, it was my job to introduce her, and I asked, what are you going to be playing tonight? And she said, well, it's going to be a short set, and I worry that it's too much on the grief side. It's panic and emergency around the loss of habitats and biodiversity. I would have added a song or two about hope. And then I saw her play another set later on in the summer, and sure enough, there are songs of hope that we can sing. That's what I suppose Stornoway's trying to do on the new album, inject a bit of hope into the whole conversation, but without losing sight of all that we're losing, and so rapidly. So thank you for telling us about that. I want to maybe explore the next question then about the conservation of tradition. So when you're writing, are there particular formats and approaches and literary contexts that you are conscious of, and you're deliberately echoing them in how you write? How do you blend the old with the new?
That's a really good question, and I'm trying to think about this. I've come to my writing in a fairly, I kind of feel it out, to be honest. I think I've never had any formal training, and it's just something that's always felt, well, actually looking back, it's always felt like something that feels normal and right for me to do, but I never really recognized it as being something I would do more than just as a means to an end to pass exams or do whatever I needed to do through my studies. It was only a bit later that I realized that actually storytelling could be the focus of what I do rather than just a part of a bigger thing. So I think I have always just done it and just felt it out and not worried too much about what's going on around me, if you see what I mean. I think, I don't know, sort of gut feelings on most of it. But having said that, of course, I guess in terms of people who write about the ocean specifically, there are obviously great writers who are doing either wholly immersing themselves in that place for all of their work, or it's coming in and being a part of a bigger picture, and of course Rachel Carson was a huge inspiration for me, and I guess she'd always kind of been there. I'd read her as a young person, and even before I had thought about writing my own books, I'm sure it was partly her kind of getting into my mind. And I guess what she was doing, maybe the tradition that she laid down, from the mid 20th century, is this idea of taking what's happening in the ocean amongst animals and ecosystems in different places and taking the knowledge that scientists are gaining about how it all works, but finding the stories within that and trying to find a way through it that will be captivating for people who aren't the scientists to read. So I think she taught me, without me really realizing it, what it is to be someone who translates science into stories. So I couldn't, I wouldn't say that sort of, I didn't set out to be to mimic her, but I guess she just inspired me at those early stages. And then I guess, yeah, after that, I just sort of went off and did what felt right, and I do what feels right to me. And it's, it always comes from, and I guess, again, this probably is what other people are doing, but I'm not sort of explicitly looking to see how they do what they do. But it does all come from this feeling of my own sense of awe and wonder. It's always that, whatever I'm doing, whether it's writing for children or adults, it's the same feelings I'm trying to express about, I really have to tell you about this thing and this amazing species that's doing this, or this, threatened ice cliff in Svalbard, or whatever it might be. It comes from that same place of wanting to share that sort of excitement, and also just whether it's excitement or worry or fears. But I think underlying it all, it is just that wanting to connect with other people and share that wonder. And it just started to feel like the right thing for me to do. So yeah, I think I haven't sort of explicitly gone about my writing in a kind of technical way, I suppose, or learned way. I just feel it out.
Well, it's really interesting, especially to hear about how you're writing with that sense of urgency to try and get a message out that needs to be got out. Whereas many authors, I suppose, write almost to themselves. They think, what would I like to read in 20 years time when I'm looking back at what I've written? And then an audience finds them sort of as a byproduct of them writing for themselves. But you're clearly writing to communicate, and in a really humanizing way. When you said you're communicating science that can often be very dry, and do it in a way that interests and captivates people. I certainly found that was the case with Shell Day. I learned a lot.
It was a really great fun. It was fun one to write, actually. It was challenging to create those little scenes that was, I was trying to put the readers in the world and sort of immerse you in or sit you in that place and have you see what's happening. So almost quite visually, almost quite cinematic, and have the animals doing something, but keeping it within the bounds of reality and not pushing it too far down the anthropomorphic sort of path, but at the same time telling a story that kind of brings to life the fact that they have lives and they do things for themselves in different ways at different times.
Yes.
So sometimes it was quite hard to find those stories, but when it clicked into place, it was great. It was great fun.
Wonderful. Well, we've heard excerpts about the snails and mussels, and I want to, for those who aren't clear on precisely what mollusk comprises or includes, I wanted to also get involved with one of the octopuses. Here we are. The coconut octopus is the star of the noon segment of the book. So at 12 noon, a coconut octopus comes out, and I'll just read briefly there. And it was really refreshing for me to read somebody giving a really straightforward definition that includes, of course, all these creatures and says how diverse they are. They've got just hundreds of thousands of species, and compared to mammals, there are just so many more of them, even though we've not met all of them in the day to day. So here's the coconut octopus very briefly. A clamshell sits still on the seabed as beams from the tropical midday sun flicker across the shallow sandy lagoon. The two shells open a crack and a pair of rounded eyes peep out, followed by a thin wriggling arm covered in suckers. Clearly, this is not a bivalve. I just love the pithy writing, and you get to cover so much in just single sentences. Thank you. And yeah, I'm gonna sure pass this around and around the whole band, and I'm sure we'll derive a lot of joy from it, and perhaps even some musical inspiration, and write a song or two starring these species. So thank you. And is there anything that you'd like to share with the listeners before we start to wrap up?
Well, no, just thank you so much for having me. And I do have, I mean, if you are, I suppose, my general message is if you have anyone in your life or yourself who is interested in sea creatures in any way, I've got lots of books that includes lots for younger readers as well. And I'm very passionate about both the stories I get to tell in picture books for kids, as well as the artwork. And I've got lots of really fantastic collaborations with a whole range of different artists making some really beautiful books for young readers, and lots of parents tell me that they learn a lot as well. So if you do check out my website if you'd like to have a look at any of those and find the work of fantastic people like the duo of artists in London called Good Wives and Warriors, who I've done several books with now, and several jigsaws. I never thought that was going to happen, but some of our books have been made into jigsaws. So if that's your thing, some meditative jigsaw doing, there are some sea creatures there. So just I'm just so lucky to get to work with lots of different people who translate these ideas I have on the page and make really beautiful books. So yeah, do have a look at those if you'd like to. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Helen. And everyone go grab your copy of Shell Day from Chicago, and we'll see you again soon. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and take care, everybody.